George of the jungle.
So today, we're going to be talking about one of the most exciting and most brilliant ideas that any loan officer has ever came up with. It's called being added onto somebody's account as an authorized user. What could go wrong with that? So anyway, that's what we're going to be discussing in the creditjungle.com today. This is George Anderson, and thank you for dropping in. And we're going to discuss something that, for the most part, is a good idea for somebody who does not have much credit. Maybe they just barely started. They've only got a few months of credit established. And as we talked about in another video, for a mortgage FICO score, you need to have 6 periods of reporting on a credit card or other accounts to establish a FICO score. Well, what if you have less than that? An authorized user is a way of saying that a son or a daughter wants to add on to a parent's account. If the parent's account has been established for 2 years and the son or daughter adds on to that account, it will show on their credit report as though they had had that account for 2 years. The credit scoring algorithm picks it up and says, oh, well, look at this. We've had this Chase credit card or whatever it may be. It's got a $10,000 limit, only has a few $100s being used every month, no late payments, paid as agreed, and bang, zoom, all of a sudden you've got this credit score. So that works out really, really great, except that every type of loan, conventional, FHA, VA, all have this broad sweeping power that is called underwriter discretion. Underwriter discretion means, in very, very simple form, is that whatever you're doing on the loan, it has to pass the smell test. And there's a lot of smell tests that underwriters kind of pick up and get wise to. So we're just going to talk about, first of all, if you're going to do an authorized account, an authorized user account, what kind should you use? What's the purpose of doing it? And what do you have to watch out for? So the first thing you want to do is that if you're going to add somebody on to somebody else's account as an authorized user, realize these are some really important tips. Number 1, American Express and Discover Card do not report authorized users. So you can get them added onto the account and you can wait and wait and wait and wait for it to show up on the credit report. It's not going to happen. Only Visa and MasterCard do. Okay, well, what kind of card do you want to add onto there? Do you want to add on a department store credit card or a furniture credit card, where basically if you can qualify to have a Pepsi and a hot dog and walk out with a lamp that you have credit? Or do you want to have something like a major bank credit card? We've talked about this in other videos, and yeah, you want to have a major bank credit card. Well, ideally, you want to have an account that has at least a 2-year history on it. You would like to be able to pick up a 2-year credit history on that. Well, what if the parent has had a credit card for 10 years and you're adding on a son or daughter that's 21 years old? You think the underwriter could figure out that they didn't have that credit card when they were 11? Yeah, they can. So you got to figure out that one first, see if that's going to make sense. Then the other thing you got to do is, if you can, realize that once that trade line reports onto your borrower's credit report, any balance and payment associated with that is now going to become your borrower's responsibility, meaning it's into their debt ratios. They may not be making the payment, but if there's a $5,000 balance and it's got a $200 payment per month and that payment blows your buyer out of the water on that, well, yeah, you raised their credit score, but you also disqualified them for the loan. So you need to understand that. So that's the other thing on there. Now, what the underwriter is looking at is trying to determine whether or not that the borrower's credit score that they have, if that credit score would have been attainable without it being an authorized user account. Now, there's certain types of authorized users that are perfectly okay. So if you have a husband and a wife, and the wife's not on the loan and the husband's on the loan, and he has an authorized user account with her, and it shows it that way, that would technically be a joint account, not an authorized user. But that's okay, and there's really no scrutiny on that. But if it's somebody that's not a family member, the underwriter has the right, and just pay attention to this, they have a right to see how the score would be evaluated in the absence of that trade line. So that means you basically have to undo it. You have to close that account or take the authorized user off, and then you have to do a hard pull credit report once that trade line has been off of there, and then see what is the credit score without that. Now, if you can make the case that, oh, no, this is a legitimate authorized user account, then the underwriter can say, okay, great, let me go ahead and see canceled checks or, payment authorizations or debit card statements or whatever coming from my buyer or my borrower who's on the loan showing that they've been making the payment on the card. They can ask that for 6 to 12 months to be able to say, yeah, that's a legitimate authorized user account. So do these things happen very often? I have never had it happen on any of my loans, but I know what the underwriting guidelines are, and I know whether or not something is going to be considered suspicious or not. Now, if you have just some random person that's on there as an authorized user, but it happens to be somebody else who's on the loan and going to be occupying and living in the house, you don't have to be married to another person that you're buying a house with. You can have just two guys qualifying for a loan together. As long as they're both occupying the property and on the mortgage, then of course that's okay. So anyway, there are some things that you've got to just kind of apply a little bit of common sense on some of these authorized user card deals. And hopefully some of the points here will help you realize the good way that you can use it to help raise somebody's credit score. And a lot of times, the difference between going into the high 600s into the low 700s, it can be a significant difference. And that's one of the strategies that I've used to help borrowers get better terms on a loan. But you got to make sure that that's like not the only thing that's on there, and that it's not raising any suspicion based upon, you know, having a $10,000 or $35,000 credit limit for, you know, a 21-year-old kid. The underwriter is going to realize, you know, that's probably not theirs, and they may discount that. So just be aware that there's some good news, some bad news with that, and hopefully if that's something that you need help on, I can give you some advice on how best to choose which type of a card you want to add. So remember, you can push button, get mortgage professional. This is George Anderson at thecreditjungle.com. Thanks for dropping in today. I hope to talk to you soon.